Hello and welcome to Backtapes. Today we are going to be looking at the issue of leadership. I am joined as always by my co-hosts Jay, say hi.
Hello.
And Dan, say hi.
Hello.
Cool. So let's get into it. Jay, over to you.
Excellent. So we're going to be just covering basically what makes a good leader. So when we go into that, we're going to look at some terminology that we may use and also can help you with describing yourself and some of your members. What is a leader? What does a leader actually do? And what I call the tenets of leadership, which are basically just some top tips, some key points for how to be an effective leader and what an effective leader is, and some concluding points where we're just going to sum up leadership in all its parts. Please remember that even though we are going to be talking about Quidditch, the points we're making are usually applicable for all sports. So if you're new to Quidditch, but you've had some past experiences in other sports, maybe you can use those in your head when you're thinking of examples.
I think you can also take it from outside of sport as well. Like a good leader in a sports team is still going to be a good leader in as a line manager and something else. Like a lot of the tenets and rules are very similar regardless. Yeah. So some terminology.
Excellent. So basically, we've got three types of leader that you're going to have in your club. And a lot of people seem to think that a leader's only one person, but a good club's going to have lots of leaders that do lots of different things. So the first type of leader we think of is our captain or our head, who we see as the overall leader, pushing the club forward, promoting the club culture, making the big decisions, and sort of at the end of the day, the top person that everyone looks to. They need to be confident and they need to be respected. Next up, we have an influencer. I'm showing my age just by saying influencer. I feel like I'm going to be sick. So an influencer doesn't necessarily have an official role within your team in terms of being a committee member or a coach or something, but they have sway within your team. They're an influencer in terms of people listen to them. They're usually a very social member of the club who's been around for a while or had past success. So they're someone that even though they're not an official role, people still might go to for advice or ask questions to or look to set the standard for your club. And the last thing we've got is a mentor. So a mentor is usually a bit more shy compared to an influencer, but they're going to be confident too. They have good people skills and they're going to support new and existing members be the best version of themselves on pitch and off it. So you're going to have your captain, your head, the key one driving the decisions. The influencer, basically this person who gets everyone else on board, and the mentor who's going to be sort of that guiding hand. And a mentor can be an influencer and a captain, and they're all interchangeable, but these are the three core types of leadership that you might see in your club.
Cool.
Okay, so the biggest misconception we get with Quidditch. What is a leader? So a leader is basically someone who has influence over the direction of the club on and off the field. You don't need an official position to be a leader. You don't need to be really good to be a leader. You don't need to have played for 10 years to be a leader. A leader is basically someone who people look to when they make decisions, and the decisions they make affect the team. A leader sets the standard, whether that's a training session and what's acceptable, whether that's a competitive game and how you approach it, or a social. And it can be a bit silly to think about like social leaders and influential leaders. But trust me, a social is when your club culture is made. And someone who has a lot of sway in that social setting is going to have a lot of sway within your club. Because trust me, if a new person joins and sees this social leader that everyone looks up to, that everyone respects, getting on the smash and making bad decisions, they're going to think that's accepted within your club. Okay? In the same way that if they see a social leader be really supportive, looking after members at a social, looking after members at a training session, that's going to be what's expected of everyone. Okay? It's a phrase I've used before, but basically the standard you walk past is the standard you become. The standard that you let slide is what you're saying is acceptable. And leaders are the people that are responsible for that.
On that point, I was going to make, especially the middle bit about how you don't necessarily have to have a role officially to be a leader in this regard. Like, you see it all the time at at clubs, at trainings and things, those people who lead the discussion after a drill or after a game, it isn't always the coach or it isn't always the captain. It is those people who just speak up and try to rally everyone around them. And you need to be cultivating that. And you need those people because it gets very monotonous hearing the same people share their opinion constantly. You need those delineated leaders down in order to actually move your club forward because everyone's trying to create it themselves.
I've always thought as a leader, and this sounds like counterintuitive, I know I'm an excellent leader when I'm not needed to lead anymore. Okay, with Team UK, I know I've done my job as a coach, as a leader, when things can self-sustain, self-generate, people can have the discussions, they can support each other. Once you don't need to guide the hand, that's when you've done a good job, because that shows people have grown.
Are you saying you're Mary Poppins?
I'm practically perfect in every way, but also the worst possible person for the sport. It's a nice little angel and devil routine. So like we said, who are leaders? Anyone with influence over the club. You're going to have a range of leaders, but the main ones you're probably going to have your captain, your coach, and your president. Okay? The best captains, leaders, coaches are not the most able players. Okay? They can be, and usually if you're pretty good and experienced, you're going to be a good leader, but thrusting someone who's talented on pitch into leadership when they don't want to is just going to affect their confidence. The best leaders aren't the best players. They're the people that excel at motivating people, facilitating success, and cultivating success. But the thing they have in common is that they're respected. Okay? And respect is the key thing that we're going to be looking at in this. Okay? A leader is only good if they're respected. If you're not respected, you're not a leader. Regardless if you're the captain, the coach, the president. If people don't respect you, that isn't leadership. Okay? Yes, Dan. What was your question?
Yeah, I was just thinking there a little bit on what you said about the best player being the leader. It can be almost detrimental to them as well, because I'm guessing you want your best player to play their best. If they're worrying about, other things that come along with leadership, would you say that could take away from their performance in some ways as well?
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to get onto a bit later where by being a leader, you're hindering your own development, usually, especially at a university level. And if you're maybe a middling team that has less coaches or leaders within the setup. And the last thing I want is for my best player to suddenly be worrying about everyone else if they don't have the capacity to do that. You look at most sports teams, most teams, the leader isn't the best player. It's the best manager of people. It's the best motivator. Okay. And if that means that I can get that extra 2% out of the best player, that's excellent, because the last thing they need is the burden of worrying about everyone else when they're expected to play at their best too.
I think you find, I don't know, from personal experience I found at least, that as you say, your captain, your president, your head official leader is often not the best player as such. No offense, Jay. But your influencers and your mentors, those leaders often are, because naturally you're playing this sport that you all want to get better at. And so the people who are better at it, they're the people that your club members will naturally look towards, because they're looking to try and pick up tips to improve. And so you see that leadership's quality there. So you need your best players to be actively focusing on their own development, so that the people who are looking up to them, looking towards them for points or whatever, get to see that process as well. So I think even though they're not necessarily elected or picked, I know that's who you're looking for. So I know that's who the influencers are. I use the example of Lucy from last couple of years. She's not been committee necessarily, but I know every beater would be looking towards her for what's kind of expected, what we should be doing, what should we be looking at. And you don't want to necessarily hamper that by thrusting leadership, actual official roles onto those people.
100%.
Nice.
Okay. something that I'm quite a big advocate of is there's no set style for success. There's no leadership style that's going to guarantee success. The biggest mistake anyone tries to make in leadership and Quidditch in life is trying to be like someone else. If you try and be like someone else, you're just going to be accused of copying them, being a poor imitation, trying too hard. You can take inspiration from other leaders. You can pick up tips from them, styles from them, but you need to be original in your approach with your club mates for them to respect you. There's a lot of times when I've been told, and James has been told, that someone's come back from something we've told them and just parroted it to their team. And that's only going to go so far. You need to put your own spin on things. The way I look at it, if I behaved like James did, I would not be near as effective as a leader. And if James behaved like I did, I'm sorry, James, I don't think you'd be very effective as a leader either.
No,
we are two quite contrasting, unique styles, but it's because we're so different, which is why we work so well together. Okay, it's about picking a leadership style that complements your personality. And the last thing, on the last line there, it says no one's bigger than the club. And everyone, when I've led Bangor, Raptors, Team UK, this is the thing I'm a big advocate of. The club has to come first, regardless of who you are. Everyone's got to be willing to make sacrifices, but the leader's no different. If the leader shows they're willing to do what's best for the club, even at their own detriment, then there's no excuse anyone else shouldn't do it either. And that's about setting the standard. Because if your captain's self-centered, why shouldn't anyone else be?
I think the other thing on that is you're only a leader, as you said earlier, if you're respected, if you're being followed. Like, if no one's following along with you, who are you leading? And so you need to have a style that fits. Honestly, that fits and is effective for the people that are with you. You'd like to think those people wouldn't elect you if they didn't fit the style, but sometimes that happens. Because, like, if you're at a club or with a group of people that are much more relaxed and chill, then a leadership style that's authoritarian isn't necessarily going to go down super well, which will then feed into the, well, you're not going to get the best out of your people, they're not going to be respected, whatever. So it needs to marry up to a degree, which can possibly mean that your natural choice isn't necessarily, or stereotypical best choice isn't necessarily the best person for the situation they find themselves in, for definite. So, like, no one is bigger than the club is that point. The club and what the club needs to come first and needs to be at the heart of what you're doing.
I think as well with what you're talking about with style, but obviously you've talked about there being lots of different leaders within the club. If everyone has a similar style, I'm guessing that's probably not going to work so well. If
it's really boring.
But if obviously everyone's got a different approach, like, for example, I might go and talk to Bill before I go and talk to Jay, for example, because a lot of the time he's a bit nicer, but but
cheers,
it depends on a lot of the time, not all the time, but it sort of depends, I guess. You've got the options and you've got the variety there. That's obviously something good as well, isn't it?
I think the most effective teams have somebody in a position of either actual authority or social authority that cater for each situation. So if you can cover all your bases with your captain, your head, your influencer, your mentor, whoever, then you're set up really well. So yeah, diversifying in terms of style and approach is helpful, provided they have a good working relationship. You don't want people pulling in the different directions. But as you say, if you want a more feel-good bit of feedback or whatever, you're probably not going to me. You're going to Bill.
I want a pep talk. Yeah.
If you want a pep talk, and that's fine. That's important that you have someone in the club that you can do that with. If that didn't exist, if that leadership structure wasn't in place to delineate down and have those social members, then it wouldn't work. Like, the club would fall apart. It's just something to be considerate of. Like, do you have that balance? Does everyone feel comfortable that their needs are addressed by at least somebody? established with the club.
Cool.
Okay, so going back to an earlier thing, the standard you walk past, the standard you become. Each session, each game, each social, the eyes are going to be on you as a leader to set the standard of what your club culture is. And there's no success in asking your players to do something if they know you would not do it, or it does not clearly benefit the club or your club culture. Okay, this is a mistake that I've made lots of times when I started my leadership, was when I'd get people to do stuff and then not do it, or they know I wouldn't do it, and they know I wouldn't make that sacrifice. And if they know you wouldn't do it, to a degree, they still will. And once you're established enough, people understand that you don't necessarily have to do it to be correct, which is a point I like to think I've got to. But especially when you're training, people need to see the benefit. Okay, your club mates are going to copy you, and their actions reflect leadership, and the leadership reflects the integrity of the club and their decisions. This doesn't mean you justify every decision, because or else you'd be there for forever, but you need to let people know how it's benefiting them. And that's something we're going to look at a bit later on. But you have to set the standard, set the expectation. If you're lazy in drills as a leader, people will copy you. If you don't take things seriously, people aren't going to take things seriously either. If someone says, we've got a big game tomorrow, everyone get a good night's sleep, and you go out on the lash, people are going to think that's an okay thing to do. All right, whether you like it or not, when you're a leader, people are going to look to you and copy your decisions. And that's about what culture you're trying to create. I mean, it can be hard. It can be hard when you know people are looking up to you, and you can't always make the decisions that you want, whether to have a good time or what benefits you. But you have to understand everything you do is setting the standard for expectations at the club, for better or worse. And that's in every aspect. You look at, especially uni teams, the captain, the coach, is usually who people look to, especially new players, in advice for their lives. Like, how does cashback work? How can I save money getting textbooks out? Where should I live next year? Or I'm really worried about my relationship because blah, 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 blah. You know, you end up leading, especially at uni, in every aspect. So you have to make sure you're setting the standard that is expected for your group of individuals. And it's really tough. And you won't be perfect. I know I certainly wasn't, and I'm still certainly not. But you've got to be pushing for it every session to get the best out of other people and the best out of yourself.
I think something that I would imagine all three of us have experienced in our professional lives, it's definitely advice that I was given and I've given to NQTs and things, is it's way easier to set the standard high and ease it back than set it low and try and raise it later. Like, if we're coming up to the beginning of the new season, you need to set your stall out early. What is expected at training? What is expected after training? All this kind of stuff. And then work it out. Like, honestly, set out what your club, what your team, what your ideology, whatever it is, out early. And then if that's too extensive, that's not what people want, ease it off. But if you start lax, trying to bring it back up is almost impossible, because they'll go, well, why should I? It was fine last week. It's like, it's something that definitely comes up every year at teaching. I think it comes up every year with clubs and stuff as well, especially with new people. Like, every team gets new members in. They need to know and just see at the start what it is they're getting on board. Because if nothing else, if you're wildly different at your taster sessions or whatever, you're essentially selling them a false narrative. Like, oh, come join our club, come join this thing. This is what it's like. Let's all mess about. And then the first one in October, where it's not like that at all, and they're committed at that point because they've paid all that money. Like, set your stall out early. Show them what you're all about.
The easiest example of this is, if your captain or your leader is not on time to your session, why the hell should anyone else be? Be on time. Being on time immediately sets the standard. And I say to people, why are you late? Okay? That is the standard that's really easy to set. And I'll be perfectly honest, viewer, if you think I'm the captain of my team, but I'm not sure if I can make training on time, captaincy is probably not for you, pal. And that's just sort of the way you've got to look at it. It's up to you to set the expectation, whether you like it or not. And if you can't do that, that's life, isn't it?
Raptors don't know it yet, but the penalty for being late is going to be a lot of running. Like, if honestly, if Jay can get there from London, right, and Phil can get there from York, you can get there on time. Like, 10 minutes of traffic isn't an excuse. You should have factored that in. Like, an hour's worth of traffic, yeah, fair enough. But big.
You're right.
I would honestly, that is the worst. I would rather you were an hour late than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I'll write that down, yeah.
Yeah, and go for it. You're not going to be 10 minutes late, are you? Because you know what's expected of you.
Because you're a social leader, Daniel. That's why. Yeah. Next slide, James. All right. So this one is something that myself and James are very keen on. I think, won't mind me saying, both of us have struggled with this sometimes in the past, but are both quite good at it now, is messaging with purpose. So everything you say has got to be clear, purposeful, and have meaning. Every message must show how to develop someone or develop the club. There is no point having a chat for the sake of it. There's no point having the fluff for the sake of it. I used to think people wanted the fluff. They don't. They want a direct point. They want to show how they can be better. Right? This involves the difficult chats about attitude or effort. These conversations need to happen away from the group. Don't do them out in public. I've had that happen before, and it's horrendous. If you're having a difficult chat, it needs to be respectful, yet firm. Especially if someone's not pulling their weight, you need to tell them. But the flip side of this is, I know something that James said to me fairly early on, is criticism is really easy, and anyone can do criticism. It's not hard. But you have to turn it into a learning point, and how this person can develop, what their future is from this point, okay? It's about progression to improve and to change. So you're doing this now, and that's not great, but here's what we're going to do so that in the future, you're the best version of yourself and you improve on this. And whether this is attitude in training or how to throw a ball or tackle or communicate, it has to be with purpose. Clear, purposeful, what can they do, why are they doing it, and meaningful. All right? There's no point, telling someone that they need to improve on something that's utterly pointless. Okay? People want things they can see. It's got to be constructive. It's got to be clear.
So I've said in a previous video, I think things need to be constructive and actionable when you're giving feedback, when you're making points and whatever. And you can find those slides on our other PowerPoint. The other thing I think gets missed quite often, which is certainly something that I'm learning more about in my professional life as I move up, and that is something called a grow conversation, where you establish the goal with the person you're talking with, and also work out what the reality is now, and that needs to cut through any semblance of ego or whatever. You need to actively going, where are we now? What is the reality? Then you need to be looking at kind of what are the options available to you in order to improve. And honestly, if you can, give them a range of them and let them pick, and that will give them a much greater ownership of their own development, of their own progress. And then you can look at where we need to get to next. If you follow that kind of flow, those conversations, even if they're difficult, are way easier to have. So the feedback still needs to follow that other model that Jay's put up and we've talked about before. But the actual conversation, if you follow that, will be a much smoother one going forward.
I'll look forward to that chat.
That's right. Every meg's going to get one.
Let's move on. So these are, I couldn't think of like a fancy set of words to make it spell something. But these are the 4 factors for moving forward when you talk to someone. So firstly, you inspire them. You give them the idea of what they could do, what they could be, how they could act, how they could play. Then you motivate them. You give them a reason to do it. Okay? Why should they fulfill this idea? Then you stimulate them. You give them the tools, the resources, the drills to achieve it. Okay, you're stimulating their thinking, you're stimulating their learning. And the last one is you facilitate this happening. So you give recognition when this is accomplished, but you use it. Okay, you facilitate this growth. You allow this growth to happen and you use it. Okay, there is no point telling me that I need to be able to throw the ball further if I'm never in a situation where that happens. Okay, the easiest one for this is losing weight. So inspire. You need to lose weight because, let's be honest, you've let yourself go. Think about the person you used to be. Think about the player you used to be. Okay? Motivate. If you do this, you're going to be fitter. You're going to be a much stronger, more agile player. You're going to be speedier. And also at the social, everyone will be after you because you'll be sexy. Stimulate. Give the tools. Here's some ways you can lose weight. Here's some drills that you can do. Have you thought about changing your diet in this way? I'm going to check up with you every week to make sure things are going okay. I'm going to support you at that social, okay? The session after to make sure you haven't ordered the food challenge again, Jay Holmes, because we know it's you. And the last one is facilitate. Once that person has lost that weight, you say, wow, mate, this is really impressive. Well done to you. I've acknowledged you've achieved your goal. Now we're going to use that. We're going to use you for the fast breaks more. We're going to use you more in open play. And if that facilitation doesn't work, we go back to inspire. Okay? If someone falls at the stimulation hurdle, you go back to inspire them. Give them the idea of what they could do and who they could be. And that's how basically the 4 stages I see of a player developing from a leadership point of view. And the stimulating one's the hardest part. But those are the 4 ways that you should see the change in a player.
Do you think, honestly, do you think that was the hardest step? Because I would have, in my mind, the stimulate side has a lot of resources available too. Whereas,
that also relies on them doing something.
Oh,
I'm
sure,
good at inspiring, motivating. Stimulate requires them to act. Stimulate
I guess it requires
them
to do something as well. Sure.
Yeah, it's the like we said with the communication, it's the response.
Yeah.
The stimulate is how they've responded to it, and you know, it's like with running. The first 10 steps are the hardest. I mean, for me, the 10,000 after that are pretty tough as well.
I was going to say, I find the first sort of 5 or 6 actually quite easy. It's the
that's how much weight I need to lose, James. That's what I'm saying. But the stimulation, I think, getting the person to get on board can just be quite difficult sometimes.
Yeah, that's fair. I was thinking it from the facilitator side, not the facilitatee, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So this is one that we touched on. When you're a leader, it can come at sacrificing one's own development as a player sometimes because you're so worried about how other people are doing, especially if you're a coach. You might not be in as many drills because you're monitoring drills. But you shouldn't see this as an excuse. It's certainly an excuse I used a couple of years ago was that, well, you know, I'm captain of the team. The reason that I've slowed down a bit as a player is because I'm so worried about other people. Little did I know it would just go downhill from there. But how you should see it, being a leader is a learning opportunity for a different set of skills, people management, motivation, and culture. And the leader does need to trust people enough that if they can take part in a drill, that the whole training isn't going to fall apart. And this is when you have, you know, the other leaders around you to help facilitate and stimulate the other members. They can help lead the drill while you're involved. I see that you're probably putting in your biggest sacrifice in the initial third of the season because that's maybe when you don't have your leaders developed. But after that, you should trust your team enough that once you've shown them a drill, they can do it without you having to keep an eye on them every 5 seconds, and you can actually do something yourself. And I think this is the common mistake, especially new club captains make, is that they basically stop training and just go into managing. And that's a surefire way to kill your progression as a player. So you need to make sure you're still getting involved. You need to trust the team around you.
It's definitely the thing I've struggled with the most when I've held coaching and playing roles at the same time. like a tendency to essentially try to micromanage it, and so not involve myself in the drill. And then I wonder why I'm not making that pass or that shot or whatever. A good rule of thumb with it, I think, or a good habit to get into, is if the more you plan what you're going to be doing and the more you've shared that idea prior to the session, means that there's more time for you to actually be involved if you're still looking to play. And you should try and do something in every drill. If you're still looking to be rostered. If you're not, if you're unable to be rostered because you're injured or you're head coach and you can't be picked or whatever that rule is, that's fine. But if you are still looking to be rostered, you need to be getting involved just so you get the reps in. And the way to do that is, one, as Jay says, to facilitate other leaders in the team that you know and can trust to kind of cover while your eye is slightly off it because you're actually running your bit. But the other one is planning it better and explaining it earlier so that they've actually got a shot. The other thing is, honestly, and it's something I've seen in hindsight, everyone should be paying attention when it's not their turn anyway. Like, the only people who can kind of be excused for not paying attention to the drill as a whole, kind of, are the ones who are actively doing that scenario because they've worked up on holding the ball, for example. But if you're next in the queue, I'm of the opinion you should be watching the drill to try and see where it can be improved or whatever. And I think that is partly a mistake of some teams, which then has meant that leaders have had to be more involved because they're having to be essentially minders of the other people going, you need to be paying attention, you need to be doing this, blah, 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 blah. Whereas if you've created a culture and you've got delineated leaders down, you can actually force them to be more attentive, which then reduces your required need. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, and here's a classic leader mistake. For all that is holy, have some realistic expectations. Okay, the average standard for one player is probably going to be very, very different to the average standard of another, and that is okay. Okay, people are better and worse than other people, and that is a sad fact of life. However, effort, mentality, attitude, that is what needs to be rewarded, and that is what needs to be held to account. Okay, myself, James, all of Raptors have incredibly high standards, I like to think, and at Team UK we do as well. All right, but there are going to be times when your club where not everyone can meet the standards you've got. But if they are trying their very best, truly their best, and they are beating their own expectations, then they should not be reprimanded for failing. Okay? It's about people being the best version of themselves and beating the person they were yesterday, to use a cliche. Okay? And you have to appreciate this, that the standards you have for one player are probably going to be different to another. And this can be really difficult. So I think myself and James have a relationship that's fairly good. I'd like to say, James, maybe I've misjudged it. And we can be quite critical of each other, and especially when we play together, hold each other to a fairly high standard. Okay? The standards we hold each other to might be different to the one we hold to, the new player who's just joined. Okay? And that could be frustrating for each other when James is saying to me, you should have made that drive. You can do that usually. And I go, well, if your passing was better, we wouldn't have this problem. And we have our little lovers tiff. Okay. It can be hard for that when, say, if Dan made the same mistake and I went, good pass, mate, you were in the right position. We just need to tighten it up a bit. That can be difficult, but that is the job of your leader, to ensure that everyone is being motivated and rewarded for their effort. Because honestly, going forward, you shouldn't really sub a player off a game for missing a pass or missing a tackle, unless they're having an absolute nightmare. But subs should come from lack of effort and lack of energy. And it's the same with training. You want to reward people who are trying their best. And this will also keep your best players in check, Because if they think that they can just play on cruise control and they're still going to be quite good, then when it comes to a game that matters, they're going to fall off. Whereas if you're constantly holding them accountable and constantly keeping them in check, having expectations which are realistic for them, then that's going to keep everyone striving to be at the top of their game.
You said before, obviously what you walk past is what you. Sorry, I've probably
the standard you walk past,
terribly.
standard you become. Spend wrong.
Yeah. So if obviously you two, we're at a training session, you two are giving yourself these ridiculously high standards. Is that not going to then those same high standards not going to pass to newer people? Yeah, let's say me. I'm there now thinking I have to have that same high standard,
because
but obviously at the same time it's realistic expectations. So
it is slightly different because the actual standard is the expectation is the same, right? I'm expecting Jay to put it's the effort that it's doing. It's just coming across. So I can tell when Jay is slacking as he can when I am, right? And that's actually what's being reprimanded. So it doesn't matter that my expectation of outcome is different because I'm aware they're going to be different. But you are reprimanding the effort. So ideally, we wouldn't have that little tip you mentioned. It would be more about why is it not coming off? How can we facilitate the change? You're never going to avoid entirely that was a bit bad, wasn't it? Conversations, but like because it's heat at the moment. But you're reprimanding the effort, not the outcome, in those kind of situations. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm never going to hound someone for messing up something I don't actually think they can do. Like if I put the pass out of your range and you don't catch it, that's my fault because I've not judged you as a teammate. Balls that Callum can catch are going to be very different to the ball that James can catch because that's just how they're made up as people. And that's what you've got to say. That's what you're looking for. You're judging your teammates based on their abilities rather than, holding everyone to the same account that I'd hold Callum for catching the ball in the air. Because that's not equality. That's just unfair.
Yeah, we're looking for equity, not equality. If you've ever seen that video, the little picture of the people on the boxes, that's what you're looking for. I will link it in the description because it is a very good point.